All right, welcome everyone. Delighted to see all of you. I'm Laura Rawlings. I'm a lead economist in the gender group, and I spearhead a lot of our analytical work and also our forthcoming World Bank Group gender strategy from the World Bank side. It's a real pleasure to have all of you here today, including our panelists who will be joining us online, and Elena as well. And thank you to everyone who's organized this. This is a session that is jointly sponsored by the Gender Group and the FCV Group. And it is about gender equality in fragile conflict and violence settings, moving from, very importantly, humanitarian responses to creating resilience. We know that gender inequality is both a driver and a consequence of fragility, conflict, and violence. And over the next hour, we're going to have a chance to listen to outstanding panelists from our own World Bank, but also civil society and government. And all of these experts have studied and have made significant contributions to addressing gender inequality, including issues also of gender-based violence in fragile and conflict settings. So our discussion today is going to focus on gender aspects of fragility and conflict, showcasing best practices, exploring the challenges encountered in closing gender gaps, but very importantly also garnering insights into risk factors and gender dynamics that heighten vulnerability in these settings, but also what factors influence the success of closing gender gaps in these settings. So we will spotlight different actors' interventions in addressing GBV and in closing gender gaps. So we will look at risk factors as well as factors for success. And we will look at what the World Bank Group has also been doing recently in this area. So many of you, and we will learn about this more during the panel, but many of you know that the World Bank Group's work on gender, on fragility, and on gender-based violence has really taken off, particularly in the past 10 years. And this is in the policy area, in programming, in operations, and in research. So we will learn more from some examples today. There are also examples that we won't cover, but that I want to highlight from the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, and other areas. Also, the bank has contributed quite a bit to knowledge and analytical work. One good example is the Gender Dimensions of Forced Displacement Research Project, which has looked very specifically at gender dimensions in not just FCV settings, but very specifically forced displacement settings. And this has been picked up also on the recent WDR on migration. I want to give a special acknowledgement to the State and Peacebuilding Fund for their support, especially on GBV in fragile and conflict settings, which has helped really propel gender-based violence as a new area for World Bank work, and one, in fact, that we are highlighting in the proposed forthcoming gender strategy. In fact, in the gender strategy, which will be released in the spring following our board date, which is presently scheduled for April, you will see that there's a tremendous emphasis on tailoring to both population groups and to contexts in terms of our gender work. So without further ado, I want to introduce Elena Bardassi, who is a senior economist in the World Bank's independent evaluation group. She leads all of the gender work there, and she is going to share with us findings from the recent World Bank Independent Evaluation Group report on gender, and that looks at World Bank support to addressing inequality in countries affected by fragility, conflict, and violence. And following Elena's presentation, we will have a panel that I will introduce with a series of experts from Somalia, Liberia, and based in Lebanon. So without further ado, Elena, over to you. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Laura, and good afternoon, everybody in the room and online. So I'm going to present some of the findings of our report. That's an evaluation of IAG that is available online. And you'll find in the back some cards with a QR code that allows you to go online and download it. So how can we even think of addressing gender inequalities in situations of fragility, conflict, and violence? It's even possible, and it's even possible to imagine that we can produce a change that is transformational. And how can the bank support the countries to achieve this change? So these are the questions that we are trying to address in this report. So, first of all, what does a transformational change look like? It is a change that is relevant. It should be relevant to the context and to the people, to the beneficiaries, to the women and the girls in these countries. It should be inclusive. That is, it needs to include these beneficiaries in the process of change. It is deep. This means that it is effective and is also addressing the root causes of gender inequalities. It needs to be sustainable. That is, it needs to preserve the results that have been achieved, but also the processes that support these results. And it needs to be at scale. The World Bank aims for scale, that is, to produce large impacts. So what we have observed, analyzing more than 40 projects in 6 FCV countries, is that the World Bank is generally able to produce a support that is relevant to the context, relevant to the needs. Generally also, it's providing a support that is inclusive. It involves a beneficiary, it consults with beneficiaries, it involves beneficiaries in one form or another. What we have observed, however, is that it's much more rare to find projects that are deep, that are sustainable, and that are at scale. And actually, if you see in this Venn diagram, these 3 dimensions are rarely found in the same project. So there is a very minimal overlap, and actually we didn't find a single project that had all 5 characteristics at once. So what does it mean? It means that in providing this type of support, the bank is facing essentially 3 types of trade-offs. The first trade-off that we have identified is between being deep and go to scale. In order to be in deep, the support provided needs to be multi-sectoral. It needs to address all these different root causes of inequalities, holistic, and definitely these type of projects are very complex, are very expensive, and are very hard to scale up. So that's the first issue we find. The second one is a trade-off internal to projects that are deep. Never mind going to scale, the fact that this project needs to do all these different things, generate expectation. They generate expectations for services like education, sexual reproductive health. They might increase demand, but they might not have enough components to really keep up the supply side. So you might find that some parts of the of these various components are not addressed. It's very difficult. The last trade-off, which is the one that the panel is going to discuss today, is between the humanitarian goals and the development goals. That is to address the impact of fragility and the drivers of fragility in the longer term. So let's look at this third trade-off a little bit more closely. So this trade-off derives from the difficulty in investing in long-term goal, while at the same time there is a need of addressing emergencies. So that's my initial question, is it even possible to think that with all the issues that we need, the famine, the displacement, is gender equality even an issue that can be addressed now in this type of situation with this type of requirements? So the answer is, well, yes, because gender equality, and I believe this is going to be discussed later, is among the drivers and is impacted by fragility, conflict, and violence. So it's not only needed, but is also possible to address gender inequalities in this environment. And the type of approach we found is a pragmatic one that is able to essentially develop along a continuum set of activities and results going from the very short term immediate relief to the longer term interventions to create resilience and address development goals. This is where the comparative advantage of the bank lays, in investing in resilience, providing services, strengthening institutions. But to do so, to focus more on our comparative advantage, the bank needs to partner and collaborate with humanitarian actors that can address the emergency and the immediate humanitarian need. So to do so, the evaluation concludes it's important to move from a project-by-project approach to a country engagement approach, because that's the only way to address this trade-off, as well as the other trade-offs that I was mentioning earlier. So this a project-by-project approach comes from the recognition that an individual project can't do it all, as well as a project is in design. And we observe that there is actually an improvement in more recent projects, but it's absolutely impossible to expect. They can be deep, scale, sustainable, address the humanitarian, and create also development goal and resilience. So this implies much stronger collaboration internally across sectors, across instruments that the bank uses, across institutions, including the private sector and IFC, and also a strong coordination with the country actors, with external relevant stakeholders. And this means, as it comes to gender, really setting clear goals, even in the immediate, regarding gender equality, setting priority, setting objective at the short, medium, and longer term. And that's the way we conclude in the evaluation in terms of combining these two different elements of the trade-off. So I invite you to read the report. You can download it. Yes, I'm looking very, very much forward to the discussion of our distinguished panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Elena. And we invite all of you to download the report and take a closer look at these very important conclusions. I now want to shift gears and welcome our panel and welcome our first speaker, who is Ms. Fardosa Abdullahi, who is the program manager for the Somali National Safety Net Program, known as Baxnano. And she is also the Social Protection Policy Coordinator at the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. And in this capacity, she was critical in the development of the Somali National Social Protection Policy, so a key member of that government initiative. And as part of that, and as a continuation, she now leads the first government-led safety net project, which is supported by the World Bank, and provides cash transfers to over 1.3 million people in Somalia. So she has a lot to share on these very important elements. And what I would like to do is turn to you and reflecting on the fact that this session is focused on moving from humanitarian settings to strengthening resilience. We know that this calls for establishing strong partnerships between national actors and local actors. So drawing on your experience leading the National Safety Net program in Somalia, can you please share with us your insights into successful strategies for strengthening government systems that also call on empowering communities and creating resilience at the local level? Over to you, Ferdosa. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and really excited to be part of this panel of experts talking about the really important issues on the gender equality in terms of the FCV settings, as well as moving from humanitarian responses to more long-term interventions, such as the program that you mentioned, Bahnano, that is being led in Somalia. So I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the World Bank for their focus on poverty reduction interventions, focusing on women empowerment in developing countries, in particular FCV settings, that has contributed to more resilience building, human capital investments, and so on. And having said that, there's still a lot more needs to be done, and to really reach the gender parity in developing countries. I think before I go and explain about Bahnano, maybe I think it's really important to understand the Somalia context and where we are in terms of the gender gap in Somalia, as well as the multidimensional issues facing Somali women, and in addressing issues of both humanitarian and as well as poverty and illiteracy and so on. And so moving from really and learning from what other countries have done in the developing countries, as well as the global south, I think Somalia started really moving to development projects in a very informed manner. So the social protection policy in Somalia was endorsed by the cabinet in 2019, and the first national safety net program funded by the World Bank, and really both at a financial level and as well as on a technical level, we had a lot of support from the World Bank in terms of addressing the long-term humanitarian cyclical shocks that has been repeating itself, and to more sustainable manner. So with this background and really the disparities in gender gaps in Somalia, the government took initiative to start the government-led social protection programs known as Bahnano. This program really is supporting women with children under 5, and it started in 2019. So the whole policy dimensions of the program was to start with the most vulnerable groups, and really that is women and children. The program is now ongoing for 3 years, and we have seen a great result in terms of both financial inclusion and having women at the center of making sure that women are supported. And we have seen increased access to education. So women have been sending their children to schools with the benefits provided to them by the government. And what we also have seen is really the collaboration between the government, the local actors, UN agencies, and different donors. So where Somalia was in starting the government-led program, we made sure that the program is not only responding to development agenda, but also ensures that it is an instrument that can be used in shock response. And whenever shocks happen, then we can make sure that we either vertically expand the program or horizontally expand the program and by its reach. We have now reached almost 72 districts of 92 districts in Somalia. So that's quite a huge coverage, and up to 500,000 households with cash transfer programs. So that's almost 3 million individuals with shock response interventions. And the really amazing part of it is that we have also managed to partner with private sector with mobile money transfers. So the program reaches to the beneficiaries 100% with mobile payment. And research actually shows us now that almost 58.6% of women now have mobile phones because of this program or because of these interventions. So we have seen that women have been empowered in terms of the financial inclusion and, having access to markets, having access to food security, as well as ensuring that they use the money in terms of, investing their children, nutrition, and so on. The program also made sure that there is sustainability in terms of making sure that there is an targeting methodology is quite accurate, and making sure that there's no leakages within the targeting methodology or any exclusion or inclusion errors in terms of reaching to the right beneficiaries. So we have invested also in what we call unified social registry, and where we are now undertaking a nationwide survey, which is also supported by the bank, to ensure that we have 100% at least of the population, and making sure that there is a sustainable manner of reaching to the poor and vulnerable household, but also making sure whenever shocks happen, we are able to respond much quicker. We've also partnered with other different donors, such as FCDO, who are using the government system to respond to shocks. And the first intervention is actually going out now for the flood-affected communities. So this really, at a policy level, we have made sure that women are the center of the program, and we are also piloting economic inclusion for women and co-responsibility cash transfer, linking it to health sector. And we've also partnered with UN agencies in terms of ensuring that the GBV, if there are any GBV cases, so we can use their centers. And also partnered with the ID agency that is also working in terms of making sure that the women inclusion is also a part of it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm not sure if I'm over the time.
You're all set. That was terrific. Let's give Fergus a round of applause, please. Quite a fascinating case, right? You have managed to address with a very new program that already is very successful questions of financial and economic inclusion, of women's empowerment, access to information, clearly also through the mobile phones, public-private partnerships, and engaging the private sector, and a lot of the shock responsive elements as well, which of course are critical in FCV settings. And we know that women are often on the front lines of absorbing those shocks. So very interesting. Thank you so much. I next want to turn to Amini Kajuju, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Presidential Center for Women and Development in Liberia. Amini has a long and distinguished career in areas around training, education, and women's empowerment. And the center where she works, that was founded by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who's a hero, I know for many of us, as the first democratically elected female president of Liberia, and indeed in all of Africa. So without further ado, we're going to turn to Amini. And we know that civil society organizations are central to providing responses and solutions in fragile and conflict settings. So as a frontline activist at the Ellen Sirleaf Johnson Center, working with Liberian communities, could you share with us how you have partnered with civil society to implement community-based approaches to build resilience and strengthens women's empowerment? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful and honored to be here to speak to you about what the center is doing here in Liberia to support civil service organizations. Here in Liberia, and being a Liberian-based institution, even though our principal is a global icon, we are rooted in our Liberianness, if I can call it that. And we believe that in order for us to build resilience here in Liberia, we need to make investments in community-driven solutions that empower local actors through partnerships. We've learned a few things from these experiences, and I want to highlight 4 of them. The first one has to do with empowering local expertise. So when we partner with local partners and experts, we're really able to leverage the existing knowledge and networks that are here in order to deliver impacting programs. The other thing that we do is through our funding and technical support to local organization, we really prioritize sustainability. So we select projects and solutions that we think and we believe have a long-term effect. That includes programs that we have supported financially and with technical assistance that increase the school attendance of young people, that also increases technology access to young women, that provides critical surgeries to children. And all of these and many others really demonstrate through these investments our ability to create long-term community improvement. The other thing is we're, even though we're still small in our investments, we, from the beginning, monitor our programs so that there are those short-term, medium-term, long-term impact. And in one of our programs, for example, in which we supported an organization and provided lots of capacity building support, we saw a 65% of the trainee that received the technology assistance, they were able to secure, 65% of the trainees were able to secure employment. And that's really exciting for us. And it's exciting, obviously, for the organization that we were working with, because they can see some immediate impact on what their investment and our investment made on those young women. And then last but not least, we believe in empowering women. This is why Madam President created this organization. It is to support women on their path, on their leadership path. And so all of the investments that we make are led by women. The organizations are led by women. And this is one of the core mission of the center, and that is to champion the ascension of women leaders, not only in Liberia, but in the continent as a whole. And so I think part of increasing resilience does have to do, and we strongly believe that because that's the core of our mission, to foster gender equality, right? When we do that, then I think we're able to then contribute to the broader and economic well-being of the society. And we're very excited about the work that we've done, and we look forward to doing even more of this type of work here in Liberia with our local actors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give Amini a round of applause, please. I'm quite struck by the fact, Amini, that many of the characteristics that you stated about what drives your investments around empowering local agents, a focus on sustainability, strong monitoring and evaluation, and empowering women as leaders actually echo quite a lot of what Elena presented in terms of what you have found as some of the factors for success in your review of projects. So I think that's really nice. So thank you so much. Now, last but certainly not least, I want to turn to one of our own staff, who is Jean-Christophe Carré, who is the World Bank Country Director for our country management unit that includes Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. He is joining us from Beirut, and in his current position, Mr. Carré provides overall strategic leadership for the bank's engagement in these countries through dialogue with stakeholders and with a very strong emphasis on jobs, sustainable growth, inclusion, and governance. So it's working on both projects, analytical work, and of course, policy dialogue. So, Mr. Carré, you have been a champion for gender equality and gender-based violence initiatives in fragile and conflict and violent contexts at the World Bank throughout your career. In your view, what determines success in World Bank operations that are aimed at closing gender gaps in fragile conflict and violent settings, especially when it comes to addressing gender-based violence? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura and colleagues, for having me. Can you hear me relatively well?
Yes, we can.
So I'm joining tonight from Baghdad, so that's not the perfect
You're not
location.
in Beirut? Okay.
No, I'm not in Beirut.
From Baghdad.
I'm visiting Baghdad, where I just landed. And but thanks for having me. I'm very excited to participate in this panel. So before relocating recently, 18 months ago to Mashrek, I was the country director for the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that all of you know worldwide for its high rate of gender-based violence. I think in DRC, the last time I saw some figures, 50% of women had experienced some type of violence. And when I arrived in Mashrek, 18 months ago, as I said, I discovered that the entire region has one of the lowest rates of female labor force participation in the world, despite being some of the most educated, at least in the MENA region. So I'm not a champion, or I'm not a specialist, but the first thing I wanted to share today is that during my assignment, and because I have been in countries where either the magnitude of GBV was extremely important, or the very low female labor force participation is also striking, I have become to some extent interested in trying through our institution and with partnership to tackle that important issue. And before telling you three possible factors influencing the success of World Bank operation, I would like to describe quickly the kind of operation I've been involved in DRC, and more recently in Jordan, one of the countries in Mashrek. So when I arrived in Congo, like 5 years ago, gender-based violence was mainly a mitigation exercise through the environmental and social framework. And I quickly understood that it was going to be extremely difficult to have a significant impact on gender-based violence if we were only addressing it through our, I would say, to make it short, safeguard policy or environmental and social framework. At the same time, exactly the month I arrived, we were presenting a standalone project on GBV for the Great Lakes, which was already an interesting step because it was not only addressing GBV through our safeguards framework, but at least devoting a project. And this project, to some extent, was already the second in a row. The first project was only centered on survivors, so it was maybe something that we can call for today a humanitarian response financed by the bank in a conflict-affected area. But the second project on GBV that we presented at the board when I arrived in Congo was already an interesting move because it was centered on preventing and sexual violence and raising awareness through campaigns. So when I was at the board, the first question the executive director asked me about, they say, yes, it's important, Jean-Christophe, that the bank tries to help the survivors, try to prevent violence, but what do you do that will have a long-term impact for development when it comes to this particular issue? And then 1 year or 2 years into the job, we decided to prepare a very large project that was providing free primary education for girls and boys in the DRC. And we knew that this project will attract millions more girls to school because in a poor countries, girls are always left behind in poor households when they cannot afford to send all their kids to school. So we wanted to make sure that the schools will be a safe space. And what we did with this project was, in my opinion, an interesting journey. First, we asked every teacher, and you have hundreds of thousands of them in the DRC, to sign a revised code of conduct with explicit language against sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. We ask every school, and you have 50,000 schools, to finance a female focal point to make sure that they could watch what was going on in the school. And we put in place, with the help of a UN agency, I will come back to it, an online grievance and redress mechanism called Allo École, as well as a committee in every school to receive the complaints. So I will come back to the results of this project, but I found interesting that in the DRC, with GBV being widespread, the World Bank moved progressively from a safeguard approach to standalone project on GBV to trying to mainstream the issue into a development project. So to some extent, we have a transition from humanitarian support to investment in resilience system. That brings me to Mashrek, where I am now. So as I said in the introduction, the Mashrek region has one of the lowest female labor force participation. And Jordan is a particularly striking case. It's only 14%, so 14% of women are participating into the labor market, while this is the country where they are the most educated. So I was puzzled by that fact. And when I arrived, there was already in place a knowledge and advocacy platform called the Mashrek Gender Facility. You probably have heard about it. That was supporting empirical research to identify what are the barriers to women economic empowerment and participation in the labor market. So to me, this platform is an excellent example, and I think some of the intervenants tonight have mentioned it, to show the importance of knowledge and analytics and trying to solve complicated questions. Among the different studies, just to give you 2 examples financed by the platform, one shows that 1 out of 2 women in Jordan have left paid work because they don't find childcare facility to take care of their kids. Another one shows that, for example, 2 out of 3 women who are not going to work are saying that they don't go to work because public transport is not safe. So in order to make progress in Jordan and to be able to help the government to increase the labor force, the female labor force participation. Sorry, it's a little bit late here in Baghdad. We have progressively understood through these platforms that it was a multitude of interventions were needed if we want to make progress. So you need to, as I said, expand access of quality of childcare. You need to invest in safe and reliable public transport. You need, of course, to change the policy environment, and very importantly, you need to address the social norms and the cultural barrier. So my message here is that it has taken 4 years of work on the knowledge side of this particular problem to allow us to prepare, and we are going to present it to the board next month, the first standalone project on women economic empowerment in the MENA region, focusing on all these aspects. And I heard our host tonight saying, when she was presented the report, that IEG found that it has also to be tackled through our country partnership strategy. You will also see that the new country partnership strategy that will be presented for Jordan next month again, the entire strategy is focused on reducing the gender gap, because we know it's one of the main factors if they want to go further into development. So quickly, after giving you a little bit of background, I want to highlight what, in my opinion, humble opinion, because I'm not a specialist, are the 3 key factors influencing the success of operation aiming at closing the gap. And you will see that I have already mentioned some of them. So first, knowledge. Second, partnership. And third, implementation support. So knowledge, I don't want to repeat what I've just said. If I had not found, when I arrived in the Mashrek, a gender platform, by the way, financed by Canada and Norway, and an exceptional team of World Bank staff working tirelessly on producing reports, making sure that they were also influencing the policy debate, I would not have been able, in less than 18 months, to bring what I think is going to be an important and a flagship operation on women economic empowerment in Jordan. Second, partnership. I want to take the example of DRC. DRC, the bank wouldn't have been able to prepare relatively successful standalone GBV project and then an education project with a lot of measures to protect the young girls going to school for the first time without collaborating with a lot of stakeholders. So I want to name somebody that you all know, Dr. Mukwege, of course. He has received the Nobel Peace Prize for dedicating his entire life to help victims of GBV. So the World Bank learned a lot from the doctors, and we couldn't have developed a project without learning from him because he has devoted his entire life. Also, the UN colleagues, UN women, who are doing a lot of advocacy work in the DRC. And I want to mention also the UN Population Fund, because thanks to the partnership with them, we have been able to position post-exposure prophylaxis kits in every single school where new girls were coming and were at risk of being sexually aggressed in the DRC. And of course, the president, he has been re-elected, was a champion on this subject. His wife was a champion. So you need, as we say in our institution, a village to make a project successful. So it's not only the bank, and we need to be humble and to recognize the collaboration we have in country when we are able to deliver interesting projects. Finally, I mentioned implementation support. I'm a country director. I've been in the field for quite some time. I strongly believe that operation needs to be supervised very closely if we want them to be successful. And the best way to supervise closely an operation is to have staff in the field. So we need all the, as we say, boots on the ground. And to give a concrete example, and it will be my conclusion, when I was in DRC, I'm very proud of having convinced my interlocutor at the time, and I think, Laura, you were maybe part of one of them, to recruit GBV specialists, gender specialists, to be based in Kinshasa, so that we can really go to school, go to the hospital, and provide empirically based and practical solution instead of theoretical ones coming from, I would say, far away. So I strongly believe in field presence and in supervising projects. So that's my final line. Sorry, I've been a bit long. As you can see, I'm very interested in the subject. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jean-Christophe. And it's wonderful to have this kind of leadership from our country directors, and especially working in areas where this is so important. And indeed, a lot of what you have highlighted are not only success factors, but also really important challenges. We do highlight in the forthcoming gender strategy the fact that closing gaps in education has not translated into closing gaps in economic empowerment, particularly labor force participation. And in fact, on average, globally, this gap has been stagnant for 3 decades. 3 decades, right? A very long time. And also what you have highlighted, and I would invite any of you to look at the retrospective that we've done on the work at the World Bank on gender-based violence for the past 10 years, where we have moved dramatically as an institution. I have been at this institution for over 20 years, and I've rarely seen something move this quickly, but we have moved as an institution from essentially exactly what you were describing, Jean-Christophe, more of a safeguards and ring fencing approach around projects, to being very directly involved in looking at prevention of gender-based violence, addressing drivers of gender-based violence, and supporting investments that can address this. So I want to invite everyone to please be thinking of your questions, including people who are online, and submitting your questions. We're going to turn to them in just a moment, but to kick off the dialogue, and I want to ask the panelists just briefly and that to answer this question, please. This session makes it clear that we need to address the drivers of gender gaps and gender-based violence in fragile and conflict settings. And it's also clear that strengthening women's leadership and agency are essential to this success. So if you had a few tips or insights based on your reviews and your experience, and how to move from more of a protection-centered approach to an empowerment-centered approach, empowering women in managing and overcoming adversity, and indeed in providing solutions. What insights might you be able to provide? So let me start. Let's just go back. Let's start. Fardosa, do you have an insight that you'd like to share on that question?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think this is a question really that needs more in-depth analysis. And one of the main things that we need to look at is not to look at gender inequality or ensuring that we reach gender equality in silos. So we need to look at the root causes of why we are not achieving gender equality in this context. You have mentioned that labor market interventions or labor force participation has not been achieved for the last 80 years. You know, we need to go back and ask ourselves what are really the drivers of women not being reaching, the same goals with their counterparts. One thing that I would like to perhaps mention is to ensure that we put women in the center and girls in the center of all programming. So each and every program or each and every project that we look at, whether it's a humanitarian program or development program, I think women need to be at the center of the design. And also really hearing the local voices. What are the issues? The women in Somalia might face a little bit of a different issue than women in perhaps Yemen. So we need to understand the root causes and the local issues that are facing women. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, root causes and local context. Amini, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to add on what Fardoza just said, I think here at the center, we believe that women should be seen as change agents. So really emphasizing that when women capacities and knowledge and opportunities are expanded, there's a higher chance that we can reduce. Obviously, as we've seen it as of late and over time, that we have not been able to eliminate the vulnerability of women, but we can reduce it by making women agents of change. We also believe, and I mentioned this before, and I think it's another element of overcoming adversity and reducing vulnerability, and that is investing in women-led organizations. I don't know if there's some stats on this specifically, but indeed, we know this in politics. Women don't have enough investment to enter the political space. Men tend to have more. Women-led organizations also may suffer from less investment. So we really want to make sure that when women have decided to organize themselves and create organizations that support the advancement of society, that we provide them with the investment that they need. The last thing I'll say is the emphasis on accountability. When you hear women here in Liberia who are working on the front line of gender-based violence and the like, they really talk about accountability at all levels of society, and that being a very important element of overcoming diversity and reducing vulnerabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean-Christophe?
Yes, so a possible answer to your question is the focus on job creation to expand women economic opportunity and to be able to transition from protection to empowerment-centric approach. So, for example, in Jordan, again, we have been very active on this front, not only for Jordanian, but also for Syrian refugees. For example, we have supported recently the introduction of a legal framework for women to start their own business at zero cost. We have also supported with UNHCR the registration of women's home-based businesses for Syrian entrepreneurs. We have supported, well, it's very common, but I want to say it, digital financial inclusion, including for refugees. And last but not least, as far as refugees are concerned, we have been able to convince the government to provide access to the labor market through work permits. So that's for refugees a very successful approach if you want to move from humanitarian support to long-term empowerment. Over.
That's terrific. Thank you so much for these additional insights. I'd like to now turn to my colleague Afra, and who will kick us off with some of the online questions.
Yeah, so first, Laura, let me just thank people who are participating online. We have about 68 participants. So far, we have two great questions. The first one is directed for Amini on Liberia. And the question is, in your work in mainstreaming gender in Liberia, how do you engage men and ensure their acceptance of a change, and particularly on women leadership, but also to influence cultural change? The second question is for everyone. And that's from a participant who is involved in working with at-risk youth girls and who are survivors of child marriage. And he's working in a region that is hit by multiple crises, political, health, and others. So he's asking which organization should they emphasize navigating these crises to support local women, female, and survivals. So particularly asking, is it international NGOs? Is it local NGOs? And then he's saying there is a little bit of pushback in engaging these organizations. So question is, what is the best organization to engage in sensitive topics in a context that is grappling with multiple crises, including political?
I'll go ahead.
Yes, Amini, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much. That's a really great question. And I'm so glad it was brought up, because at the center, we have a campaign called Have Her Back campaign. And in this particular case, we are working with presidents, African male presidents who are very close to Madam and have supported her and have worked with her over the years. And she's worked with them on various projects. We have asked them to claim the notion that they, as men, support gender equality, not just in words, but in deed. So actually, if you go to our website, you will see the male presidents that have been involved in this, and the work that they're doing to join forces with women so that gender equality gets accelerated. Indeed, at the center, we do not believe that the work can be done alone with just women. Men and women have to come together, and those male champions are critical across every field in every sector of society, from young to old, in every country, in every community. The men and women have to come together in order for gender equality to happen. And like I said, we have a specific campaign to work on this and to amplify the need for male champions. Thank you.
Great. Jean-Christophe, do you want to go next?
On the second question, that's what I was invited to answer.
That's
Look,
right.
I'm not sure I have the right expertise to answer, but if I take the example of Lebanon, where I am based, where the country has almost, and the state has almost entirely collapsed during the last 4 or 5 years, being hit by one crisis after another, global ones and domestic ones. The civil society is playing today a very important role in trying to prepare for recovery and find, by the way, new way of governing the country, because one of the reasons the country has been hit by the domestic crisis is also bad governance. So I'm not sure I'm answering exactly the question that was asked, but I think that civil society platforms are a very important governance tool in countries that are hit by crisis and where the traditional governance system are not anymore able to function. Over.
Great. Thank you so much. Fardosa, do you want to add to that on the second question about organizations?
Yeah, thank you so much.
You've heard it.
Yes, I have. Thank you. I also don't think I'm the right person to answer onto this question, but definitely the civil society organizations and really the community leaders, empowering the community leaders to be part of this discussion of early marriage is one that needs to be addressed. But we also need to understand is early marriages can be cultural, but sometimes can also be seen as an investment by the parents in, investing their child into mostly it goes to getting married to an older person for financial gains, perhaps. So we need to really understand the root causes as well as make sure that the elderly within the community, the parents are educated in what harm can bring into early marriages. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think since we're getting right to the end, we'll see if there are any questions in the room. Brief, and please introduce yourself. Please.
Hi everyone, I'm Razia Sultana. I'm based in Bangladesh and I'm a founder of RW Welfare Society. I'm working for Rohingya women in camp, also host community. As a women organization, and I'm working for women in field level is my everyday life. One thing, as a woman leader, I didn't get any attention from whatever the so-called INGOs in Cox's Bazar, except UN Women. Maybe sometime we are present our voice in some event or in some pilot project. But because we are connector, we are direct related with the field level CBO. Even if you think in the 2023 Bangladesh JRP, gender subsector, they are not included, not a single local WLO. So how can we accept change? Because we know women are change of society and they are agent of, if we are not connected with whatever is a UNFPA or UN Women program, so how can we because sometimes we are rejected because we don't have the capacity, but we have the all tools in our hand how to connect her. So my question is World Bank take any initiative, or if have initiative, who know this and the initiative will go who? Because we are not part of this, but we are in the field. This is very important when you think about the prevent the GBB or society change. Thank you.
It's terrific. I know we're running out of time. Yes, please.
Thank you. And I'm Victoria Stanley from the World Bank. Just very quickly, going back to Elena's point on depth versus scale. We know that really making deep inroads on gender equality requires dealing with social norms, but that's very difficult to do at scale. So I was just wondering if any of the panelists had anything to tell us about that and from their own experiences. Thank you.
Super. So, Doreen, can we do just 30 seconds from?
I think we can do one more.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let me just do like 30 seconds from each panelist, and I actually want to start with Elena as well. So,
to the last question, I think that Jean-Christophe actually responded earlier when he was mentioning moving to a big education project. Some of the insights that were gathered from standalone, what we decide standalone project for gender equality, I think that's the right way to do it. And he explained, it's some elements that had been grafted, if you want, into these other projects that are already meant to go to scale. So it's impossible to think that a standalone, very complex project just for gender can be expanded as such, but things like this one can be done. So that's a possible way out. On the previous point, I think that that's also a very interesting point. I mean, I'm not here to answer, but I can say that in the evaluation, we found that indeed involving earlier the civil society when the project is designed would actually achieve a lot of benefits on many of the different dimensions that I mentioned before, including the efficacy, because knowing how to better design projects and to tailor them to the context that the local women's organization, for example, are the ones that can offer the best insight, but also for sustainability, because clearly we are talking about approaches that communities might have already internalized in some ways and that can actually, expand at the very, very local level, community level. So it's a quite interesting. Actually, we are looking at Cox's Bazar in the next evaluation that we are currently doing. So maybe we are able to say something more.
Great. Then let's quickly go to our online panelists very briefly, and then we'll close. Fardosa?
Thank you so much. And just wanted to, was there a question that was asked by the participants?
Yes, there were some about social norms, and then there were some about working with local organizations.
Yeah.
But also feel free to use this last few minutes for any closing thoughts that you have, because we'll have to close after this.
Yeah, thank you so much again, and really wanted to thank again the World Bank organizers, Afrah and Doreen and everyone else that I've been interacting with. And in terms of the social norms, I think there's really something that definitely needs to be done from in FCV context, where women really are not seen as the change makers, or really as seen as priorities in terms of education, in terms of workforce, and so on and so forth. So I think ensuring that in every setting, so in every, and I mentioned before, in every programming, making sure that women are the center of each interventions within the FCV context. And few last thoughts. I think ensuring that women are financially empowered, women are educated, making sure that mothers are educated to ensure that their girls are not led to early child marriages, and ensuring they are taking making sure the investments of children, especially girls who are not seen as priority, sending them to school. I think so. There's a lot of cultural shift that needs to be done, and I really hope that each programs would be looking at women as the change makers of any society, if we are to move from fragility to development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fardosa. We'll go to Jean-Christophe and then Amini to close, and then I'll turn over to Doreen. Thank you.
Well, I have one last comment, not exactly related to social norm, but to what my colleague Elena just mentioned. So if you want to have sustainable and impact at scale, I think we better be ready at not underestimating the volume of investment needed. I have been discussing with the Jordan government for quite some time the importance for them, for example, to invest in public transportation. If Jordan is not capable of investing in public transportation, they won't be able to increase a lot the female labor force participation. It's key, but it's not nothing. Investing in what the public transportation in Jordan, and they have one pilot, is what we call the bus rapid transit. We have other examples around the world. It's a couple of $100 million for a city like Amman, the greater Amman. So it's not a small investment. So sometimes people think that in order to promote gender inequality, or to promote gender equality, it's only soft measures that are needed. I just want to bring the attention of the audience that sometimes it's also large public investment. And I think it could be the role of the World Bank to explain that to government, to invest in this infrastructure. Over.
Thank you. Amini.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to Doreen and her team for this invitation. I've learned a lot. I think my thoughts are the following. Social norms are very difficult to overcome and to change. But there have been some change and optimism that I have when it comes to the time that it takes to change gender norms, and one of them has to do with the way we've been able to globally encourage that girls need to go to school. And I understand that there are still parts of the world where this is still not understood, but the campaign is loud and strong, and I think we will be able to take that message throughout the world, and I think in time, and this is the challenge, in time this everyone will be convinced that girls do need to go to school. The other social norm that we've seen change over the past several decades, certainly over the past 50 years, is the notion that women need to, want to, deserve to work outside the home. And we've talked a lot about economic development and the economic development of women, and the financial needs that women have, the employment needs that women have. And there was a time when women working outside the home was seen as something extremely bad. And it's true that there's still places in the world where that's still the case. But I think it's a very acceptable way of thinking now. And I think the more work that we do in that area, we'll be able to, again, convince the whole world that women have the right to work outside the home. And then lastly, I'll come back to the center. Again, Madam President created the center to change gender norms and to help women and men understand that women can be leaders, should be leaders, and are leaders. And the work that the center does, not just in Liberia, but across the continent, is exactly to send that message and make sure that women are at the decision-making table. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. I'd like to give a big round of applause to our panelists, to Elena. This has been really inspiring. I also want to really thank Manuel, Doreen, and Afra, who are the power and the brains behind this excellent sessions, and would like to hand it over to Doreen to close. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Laura, for your excellent moderation. And thanks very much to the panelists, Amini, Jean-Christophe, Dosa, and of course, our very own Elena as well. So I think it was a very rich discussion. I think this has really shown us that we needed 2 hours, not just 1 hour, because we've gone way over time, and it's really great to have all of you here. But we've had a great discussion. We've really looked at how all the insights of how we move from humanitarian responses to more development choices. We've talked about infrastructure. We've talked about the importance of investing in women's organizations. We've talked about education. We've talked about engaging men and boys. So I think there's a lot that we've taken in today. And as we move forward with the gender strategy, there's a lot that we've learned as well. So thank you all for coming. There's a lot more interesting sessions throughout the week. So I'm sure we'll be seeing each other. So thanks again.
Yeah.